On the desk of the commander of the Groton Naval Base's desk, there's a phone with no dialer on it. It's just, there's only one place it calls, and you just pick up the receiver. To my knowledge, the only time that was ever used was entirely my fault. When I joined the Navy, I should have known, but I did not know that people would tell me to do things and I would have to do them. And I resented it from the moment it started until it ended. So I was not a very good sailor. My uniform was filthy, my hair was always just a tiny bit too long, and I tried to wear my face so that every officer who saw me would wonder if he should tell me whether or not to shave. But in order to get away with all this, I had to be very good at my job. I worked in radiological controls at the Groton Naval Base, where all the nuclear submarines came in. Now, on an occasion, we had to be relicensed. This was very, very important. If we didn't get our license, the entire base would be shut down. You can't service submarines if you can't control the radioactive stuff. So it was very important, and because it was important, they asked me to be the control point in a very important contaminated injured man drill. My chief looked at me and he said, "Dave, please, please, just once, act like a sailor, just for a few minutes." I said, "I don't know," but I did it. So the drill was that a contaminated, injured man with an injury would be taken from a submarine, and he would be on an ambulance where I was the control point, and we would transport him to the hospital. So in the ambulance was the EMT and myself, and a very, very squared away, sour-looking commander, and the driver. We started to drive, and I began to do my job, and I took the radiac. I started to frisk the man. Now, at a certain point in this drill, the commander is supposed to take his pencil and lean over and point to the spot on the dial that's supposed to represent the contamination that's supposed to be there. And then I do my calculations and make my reports, and we go on with the drill. So when I got near this man's abdomen, the commander leaned over with his pencil, and he began to point with his pencil on the radiac when the needle, for real, pegged out. It went to the end and alarmed. There was real contamination. I changed the setting and it pegged out again. There was very serious, real contamination. This was not a drill. This was dire. The commander dropped his pencil and jumped back to the end of the ambulance, plastered against the wall as if he could avoid being contaminated by freezing against the wall. I yelled to the driver to stop immediately. And when the driver stopped, I looked over at the commander. I said, "Okay," I called him dude. I said, "Okay, dude, you're in charge now." And he shook his head and he said, "Oh no, you're in charge." So I had to call in a radioactive emergency. I used the radio. I called a base lockdown. There's thousands and thousands of people. Every gate immediately clanged shut. Sirens started. Every gate guard locked and loaded. It was serious. Men in yellow anti-contamination clothing began taking tiny swabs of paper and swabbing the road, that the entire length of what we had driven, to make sure that there was no contamination. This is the point where they picked up the phone and called the Pentagon. "We have a terrible emergency." At that moment, I was literally the commander of the base for a very short time until someone else arrived to relieve me of command. And I did a good job. I frisked the man. We got to his abdomen again. We took his pants off. He was still contaminated. We took his underwear off. He was still contaminated. I looked over at the commander. Now, if this was cobalt-60, this guy was going to die. So I had a little tear in my eye as I looked over. The commander looked back, very dour, and I started to talk to the man, where have you been? We started to backtrack, and at no point had he done anything that would have got him involved with any radioactive material, so I was very curious. Finally, he said, you know, this morning I had a barium Enema. Do you think that might do it? I looked over at the commander, who peeled himself away from the wall, and he smiled at me and he said, "You pass." Thank you.